Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, boy GrandmastaJ, good morning to everybody who is here up in the morning with me. It is time to talk about Dizzy. Now, she has been the first character of season 4 that has been released, and since then, it's already been like about a week and a half or something like that. So now it is time, especially for someone who has played her for that entirety of that week, to go over whether or not she is strong, whether or not she fits into the Guilty Gear Strive sort of ecosystem, and how does she match up against all the other characters. In today's video, I'll be going over all of her strengths, all of her weaknesses, as well as some other things that I feel like is important to know if you decide to pick her up. Without further ado, let's get into it. So Dizzy's archetype in this game is that she is actually a zoner mix-up hybrid. So she has a lot of these zoning tools that's very good at keeping away the opponent, but these tools also double as strong mix-ups when you actually get in on your opponent as well. Right off the bat, one of her biggest strengths is that her specials are all very strong, okay? They're actually extremely good zoning tools as well as combo tools. They're super good on to kind of like deter your opponent. Everything from fish to firefish to icicle to her sword, they all kind of like work well together, which, like, I know that sounds strange, but when you have a character like Bedman that comes out and all of his specials kind of feel a little jank to use, it's kind of refreshing to have a zoner who all of her tools just kind of like work out the box. I'm gonna briefly go over into each and every one of her specials, but this is not necessarily a special tutorial. This is just kind of like describing what makes each of them super good. Starting off with her ice fish. So she has two fish, right? One covers the skies, one covers the ground, and they kind of just like move forward until they actually make contact with the opponent, right? Now, what's interesting about the ice fish in particular is that when you backdash, it actually does count as being airborne. Another thing about it is that it actually goes super duper high up. So against matchups like Chip or Milia, it doesn't matter how high in the sky they are, the fish is still going to trigger, activate, and directly zoom straight towards them. The tracking on these things when they activate is actually super good and super annoying to deal with. And they can do things like cover your opponent's backdash options, cover your opponent trying to do a DP. Like literally, if I just do this and run up and block, my opponent literally just has to hold the fish, which is like super strong. Overall, I would say this is the crux of her gameplay. She can really navigate around these fish in neutral and like up close. And the only disappointing thing is that she can't really do blue wild assault into fish because this is actually like a minus block string. But I also kind of understand, because if she was allowed to do this, it would actually be pretty darn strong. Of course, not only is it a good zoning tool, but it's also the crux of her mix-up game in its entirety. You use fish to cross up your opponent, to go under, to go high, to go low, to go dust. It just does it all for you. Next, let's talk about her fiery thingy. So this move is super good. It actually has a really high projectile durability. It kind of like tracks to wherever the frick your opponent's at. So if your opponent's in midair, you can actually like do things like throw a fish here and then do that if your opponent tries to jump and do like a jumping air dash that will usually catch them. It's also super duper strong up close because it is actually Omega plus on block. In fact, it's so plus on block, I'm gonna have Kai set to throw here, and as you can see, that is a true block string. So you can do some really gnarly stuff, like kind of like shimmy your opponent after one of these fish. You can also just go and like do things like this if you're trying to stall for some time or build some meter. Hold on, now I can do 2 reps. Here we go. Hold on, 2 reps. Watch. Yes, sir. Because of this move, it actually makes her being in your face like very scary, as a matter of fact. I actually did not know there was a gap there. Doesn't matter if there's a gap there, because who the frick is going to be throwing after that? Next, I want to talk about ice. Ice is interesting because there's 2 versions of it. There's one where it's kind of like this mid-range icicle, where if you feel like your opponent's running and they're going to get very close to you, you want to throw this one out typically. Or you have the full screen one, which you're going to be using most of the time, which tracks basically from like near mid-range to completely full screen. Not completely full screen, but like if this is full screen, if I like inch up just a little bit, like even if I tap on the dash button, right, when I do it, hold on, Like, automatically, I get to hit them with ice. What makes ice super, super dangerous is that it's just so enabling. I could just tag my opponent with this. All of a sudden, I'm back in the game. What's also super unique about ice is that it actually puts your opponent in a standing position. Even if your opponent was once in the air, say, for example, you get something like this, right? Whoopsie, hold on. They're now freaking grounded, which is like, there's so few characters in the game. There's so few moves in the game that allows you to make your opponent go from an airborne position to a grounded position. This is just super strong, especially when you add into the mix the actual ice floor. Now, this ice floor has a bunch of unique properties, all of which pretty much benefits Dizzy, except for one small tiny little thing we'll go to, but whatever. Not only does this essentially halt your opponent's running momentum entirely, which allows you to just set up for Fish and all of your zoning tools like just way more, right? Like literally, like my opponent just cannot get to me in the time it takes for me to be able to throw out my stuff. It also has this unique property that on knockdown, it kind of like makes your opponent like pop up and like then do like a super duper long hard knockdown, which allows you to set up for some gnarly stuff. And this essentially works off of anything that causes your opponent to touch the ground, including throws. Yes, she's actually able to meterlessly combo out of her throws and get some pretty good damage. So if you're able to get a knockdown with ice on the floor, it just enables Dizzy to get the most messed up of all mix-ups that she has. One more super duper interesting thing is going back to that whole restand property is that she also has super easy access to wall slumps, and her wall slump pressure, especially since Fish kind of pushes your opponent out of the corner, allows her to set up for freaking 50-50s out of the corner. Like, what the frick is going on here? Not to be facetious here, but ice, this move right here, truly is like a great equalizer for her. With this move, she's truly never out of the game. And finally, we have Sword, Mikael's Sword. Now, this move I originally thought went full screen. It does not go full screen. It goes about 3/4 of the screen, but that doesn't make it any less super duper ultra strong, right? If you're able to like catch your opponent in like a recovery phase, right? Which honestly is harder than they really made it seem. You're able to fully get, oh, hold on, I got it. Boom, you're actually able to fully link this into the ice sphere, do a little micro dash. Hold on, wait, I got the micro dash. Hold on, we got it right here. Boom, do this. Boom, there we go. Into full knockdown, run up conversion, and now you're winning the game. This move is a super good deterrent if you want to throw out Fish and your opponent kind of like wants to smack Fish because they're getting a little cutesy wootsy. You can just hit them with a big fat giant sword and be like, boom, get the frick off my Fish, man, get the frick out of here. The only downside to this move is that kind of like in the mid-screen era, like it is susceptible to 6Ps, it is susceptible to getting jumped over, it does have a lot of recovery, and it is -10 on block, so that's something to keep in mind. An honorable mention would be her jump D. Now, this is not a special move, but it kind of like is the spiritual successor to her bubbles. If you guys remember her bubbles, those are really fudging stupid. This move is surprisingly much better than I originally gave it credit for. That sort of lingering mid-screen hitbox is very, very annoying to deal with because you can't necessarily interact with it, and it kind of leaves her airborne so she can actually run up after it. Like, say for example, I put the fireball right here, right? It's very difficult for my opponent to 6P me because the fiery fudging projectile is like right there on the screen. So it's good at just halting your opponent's approaches while you set up for things, right? Like it kind of lasts almost just enough for you to be able to get something out. Next, I'd love to talk about her 2D because honestly, if it wasn't for her 2D, I think this character would suck turbo beans. 2D goes so fucking far. Like, look at this nonsense. Bro, it goes mad far. It's super, super good. It's very, very rewarding on a hit. If you manage to counter hit your opponent with this move, right? You're actually able to get a full gosh darn combo. Hold on. Hold on, I never drop it twice though. Look at that! Like, that's ridiculous. It's very, very good because, like, I believe it is. I don't know if it is her. It might actually be her farthest poke. It might just be her farthest poke. Yeah, no, it's definitely her farthest poke. It's a low. It causes a hard knockdown. Even if you don't get a solid hit, or if you don't get a counter hit, you're still able to just do this into fish, and like there's really nothing your opponent can do unless they block it, right? Like it's just so gosh darn enabled. You just mash this out and be like, oh hey look, oh I'm scared, smack, oh hey look, great, we're back in the game. Another one of Dizzy's strengths is that she's actually surprisingly really good at using her dust. Now what's interesting is that her dust is a little stubby compared to other characters, but because Dizzy is able to knock you down and do things like put you in these kinds of situations, right, where she's like point blank in front of your face, it doesn't really matter that her dust is that stubby. Like look at how footed stubby this thing is. Hold on. Like you gotta be like, dang, not even that close. Boom. You gotta be like that close. Like it's mad stupid. It ends up being a non-factor in the grand scheme of things, because when you actually get a hit on your opponent, you're able to kind of sneak it in where you want to. And because of the reward that you get off of it, where it is that super long hard knockdown state, it allows her to more easily snowball into round wins if she's able to get it. It sort of reminds me of how Happy Chaos is able to use his charge dust, because he just has access to being able to combo off of it all the time. She doesn't really necessarily, she's not able to combo off of it all the time, but she builds enough meter because her actions per minute are so high that it almost feels as though I always have access to it when I want to use it. Which brings me to what I think is her strongest point, which is that Dizzy's truly never out of the game. Like all I really need, even if I'm far behind, is one knockdown into fish, right? Say I do this, go into dust mix, boom, right? I want to mix him again, yoink, I yoink him up, right? Another freeze, knockdown, cross up, and they're usually dead after this, right? Like they're not really living this right here. Because of Dizzy's tools and because she's a zoner, she's never really in a state where she's out of the game, because if you give her enough space, she's able to kind of like zone her way back into you. And if you're point blank in front of her, then if she gets lucky boxing you somewhat, she is able to get like, if she's able to get like something like this, then all of a sudden you have to guess just more than a few times. She's pretty good at shimmying people. It can get really scary really quickly. Another thing too is that Dizzy's actually a pretty high damage character, right? Like something like this doesn't do no damage. Like that's a pretty decent chunk of your life right there. Oftentimes if I get something like this, like a jump in, right, and I really want to kill my opponent, I kind of just can, which is not necessarily like part of the course of an actual zoner. Like most zoners in the game don't really do that much, but she can kind of kill you. And I touched on it before, but as a zoner, when she's in your face, because of the existence of this firefish, she actually has some very, very scary, like up close pressure. For example, she can do things like firefish. She has this fully charged manatee thing, which is like plus 18 guard crush. So usually if I knock down my opponent, I kind of can do this and then do this and then run up and throw them because of, you know, guard crush protection. And as I was mentioning before, God forbid she gets you in a corner position like this, where she's able to kind of like throw loop you consistently, right? She's able to get you in a throw fish, run in front of fish and throw you, and then kind of like do it again. If I do it again, I can like sort of like look. If I do it again, I can do this, jump, and then the fish hits you because you tried to tech or you tried to backdash, and then you guys get the idea. Oh, that's right. Another button that I did want to talk about is her 5H. Her 5H is kind of ridiculous. It's not that strong, but it's kind of also stupid, like really, really stupid. Like you can't really 6P this button at all, which is like very interesting because I believe Guilty Gear wanted to move away from giant swinging buttons that like lead to high reward, and this leads to some pretty gosh darn high reward because of the fact that it can actually freeze you, right? You can also, like, if you react to it, you can go into ice and then just get started. But for something that is so big that you can't really 6P, it kind of makes me like tilt my head a little bit, like why the fudge would they give her this move? It's especially strong in situations like these where like she kind of doesn't really know what else to really press. Yeah, and this is kind of the weakness of it, which is that if you're not getting a counter hit, it really doesn't do anything, right? Like you kind of have to like bank on getting a big reward. I guess your reward on like regular or block is that you kind of get pushed out to a much more comfortable distance. But yeah, it's an interesting move. I don't know how reliable it is, but it is something definitely to dig further into. With all of her strengths out of the way, let's now talk about her weaknesses. So first things first, she's just not good at boxing. She's not good at boxing at all. Her mid-range is surprisingly pretty darn weak. Reason for this is that, yes, her far slash is, you know, it's multi-hitting, it goes very far, but it has so little hit stun, as you can see there, that it's so hard to like tell if you hit it that you kind of like have to buffer almost, which sort of like defeats the purpose of having a button this strong, because like if you do this into this and your opponent blocks it, right, then you're just like, I mean, the pushback is actually kind of ridiculous. I ain't gonna hold you, golly. But like, she's still like kind of like stuck in this animation for a while. Her 2S is like pretty notable, but as you can tell, it is fairly stubby. It also comes out in 10 frames. Oh yeah, that's right. Her far slash comes out in 12 frames, which is quite a freaking long time if you're trying to box your opponent. Her close slash too is like relatively slow. It only comes out in 8 frames, which is like really slow. Like sometimes I'm trying to like meaty my opponent and like I mistimed it because it's 8 frames. It's 8 frame startup and I get fucking scooped and I get really mad. And again, talking about 5H is that 5H, while it is a decent button, while you know, on actual counter hit, it's also slow and it is not that reliable because like there are often times where like you're in this awkward position where I'm like, oh, I pressed 5H. Oh wait, I didn't cancel in time, and now my opponent's just like, okay, and then they run up in my face, or freaking Kai does foot in, you know, he freaking breaks my ankles and stuff like that. Dizzy has a sweet spot where she just really fucking sucks, right? Like it's kind of outside of her K normal range, right? But it's like between here and here, right? Like this range right here, I feel like is where Dizzy's at her weakest, because she can't really like throw something out reliably or comfortably, right? She can't really do stuff like that pretty comfortably. Even like if she gets hits like these, right? If I do this, my opponent can jump over that, right? Or my opponent can 6P that. If I do this, it's nice, but like, I mean, it's okay. Like it pushes me back at a range where I want to be more comfortable at, but ultimately I am banking on kind of like these bigger swinging buttons against characters that otherwise can just jab me out, like against Sin, against Axel. Oh God forbid I fight against an Axel player. Like it's tough. This was further on my list, but I have to emphasize the biggest reason why her mid-range sucks is because her 6P trash. Look at this fucking button. Why does this button suck so much? Look at how close I am to Kai. That did not hit. That's fucking crazy. Is that not crazy? This button truly like keeps me up at night for how fucking bad it is. Like it's actually truly atrocious. Like you can't, in situations where like my opponent would do something like this, I can't fucking like really like dude, I can't hit him. It like clashes and that's like super awkward, man. Like it's just it's fucking awkward. Like I have to be like closer than average for it to actually like work most of the time. And because usually it's hard to explain, but in practice, in matches, it whiffs so often, like way too dang often, especially in a game with such a volatile mid-range. You're fighting characters that have moves like this, right? And you can fucking slide in your DMs like, hey, what's up? Yo, what's up, girl? I'm the fucking king. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, what's going on, girl? You know what I mean? Like, to be fair, Kai was a bad example, but a more common example of not having a strong mid-range shows when you're fighting characters like Johnny, when you're fighting characters like Nago, when you're fighting characters like Axel, when you're fighting those characters that do have a very strong mid-range game, it is very tough for Dizzy to really get the fudge away from them, right? Because realistically speaking, what do I do against Mistfinder? What do I do against Mistfinder? I can't do anything because my buttons are too gosh darn slow. Like, yeah, like, oh, gee willikers, Batman, I fucking died. And usually the answer to these situations is to 6P. But as you can see, her 6P just does not work like that. Like, from this range, Nago, Axel, Johnny, anybody else can be able to actually counter hit Johnny in this situation and be able to contest and like push him off of you. But Dizzy can't really do that because her 6P is so weak. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's something that you're going to have to really work around if you want to play this character series. Another thing too about Ice, which kind of sucks, is that the ice floor is a double-edged sword, right? Because every property that works against your opponent also works against Dizzy. The freaking hard knockdown thing, it also is not very good for Dizzy as well, because it gives your opponents much better knockdown situations off of things they otherwise wouldn't get, including stray hits like a stray friggin' far slash that clipped you out of the air, or a stray 6P that clipped you out of the air does also cause Dizzy a hard knockdown. So if your opponent's able to actually utilize that time, they're actually able to get some pretty gnarly stuff on you, like this. Like friggin' Johnny, say for example, he throws me here, and he knows he can get a super after it. It's kind of fudged up. Another thing about the ice floor that kind of sucks is that it's a little unruly, right? There are some times where I really don't want to glide into my opponent, but if I pressed forward just a little bit, then all of a sudden I will start freaking flying at them, and then they can run, especially if I'm fighting against Potemkin. Oh, God forbid. I can't get away from him because his buttons don't push me back no more. They just bring me towards him. So I'm like really fudging scared for something that I put on the gosh darn ground. I know I harped on it a little bit too long, but overall, these are not really like game breakers. This is not something that will make Dizzy like uber trash in the game. I still think she's like fairly strong, but it is important for you to know what she does struggle with. Now, I'd like to go over Wings of Light. This move is very controversial because people don't really know whether or not it's good. And like, I feel like we've kind of come to a general consensus, like unanimously, that this is not necessarily a broken move. It is sort of a win harder move, so to speak. Josh, what the fudge does any of that mean? Well, it's like a move that works very well if you're already winning, right? Now, normally you wouldn't necessarily pop this move in neutral, although there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, that might be the better strategy. I typically like to use it when I get something like a Blue Wild Assault, right? Like when I go into Blue Wild Assault, there really is nothing else more safe for me to cancel into, because going into Blue Wild Assault into Fish is not good at all. That's actually punishable right there. But Blue Wild Assault into Wings is actually something I can kind of get behind. And so now I do Blue Wild Assault Wings, I go for Fish, I go for a second mix-up, right? Boom, block string, and then now Wings triggers, Wings activates, and then I'm good to go. Problem is, I had to get 2 mix-ups for Wings to actually trigger. And those 2 mix-ups can be blocked. Those 2 mix-ups can be teched. Those 2 mix-ups can be avoided. And that's kind of what I mean, is that you normally, when you activate Wings, you either get a big hit, such as like something like this. You'd get something like this, right? Whoopsie. Into knockdown. And then you knock them down. And then you have to go for a mix. And then you get the mix, and then you kind of allow Wings to triggers and activate. But if your opponent blocks the mix, you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not really gonna get Wings to pop like that. So overall, if you're doing well, Wings allows you to just win games faster. Great, fantastic. If you're not doing well, Wings is not going to be an X Factor comeback mechanic unless you get a certain hit, but you know, like, not really. So keep that in mind. As of right now, in the current meta that is the Dizzy meta, it's still sort of a gimmick. But overall, if you're interested in playing this character, I think she fits extremely well into this game. I think she is very strong. I also think she has a lot of room for growth. Yes, we're still doing like layer 1 stuff. Like, I'm still doing this because I still think this is still fun and strong. But this is kind of scrubby, right? Some people tech it, some people don't, right? But there are still a lot of things, like, for example, I'm already having people block, you know, some of my day 1 cross-up stuff. But ultimately, as the character gets further developed, as she's definitely a lab monster character, you can come up with some pretty gnarly stuff. I think Dizzy has a lot of potential for growth, and for her to already start out pretty darn strong is a good sign of things to come. Competitively speaking, I think Dizzy is a character that can potentially win solo, but she will run into a few natural predators, such as I was saying, Johnny, such as Nago, such as friggin' Goluas, such as Ramathal, right? She can still kind of get run at, as well as, you know, other characters like Asuka and Axel and Faust. She has like some natural predators of characters that like zone better, that she can't really get ice off. Like, if she can't get ice off on you, then it's kind of tough for her, right? But I feel like with further developments, with further understanding of the character and further understanding of those matchups, she definitely has the potential to win a tournament solo. Even, like, you know, you might want to counterpick 1 or 2 matchups, but I think she is doing pretty well. Overall, Great job, Arxis. Dizzy, she's fantastic. In season 4, with the character with a freaking patch with a bunch of different war criminals, is a nice breath of fresh air to have a DLC character that is not overly broken or overly trash. She fits nicely right in the middle. This is where we like all of our DLC characters. Okay, this is where we like them, right in the middle. Okay. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, please consider liking and subscribing and all that hoobity hobla. And as always, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.